When when it's time to begin, it's on the Rewind Around with John Pollock and Wai Ting. The A-Team that makes sense of these things we see in the ring every week on TV. It's Rewind Around for Monday night. Download it Tuesday morning from the Post Wrestling site. It's Rewind Around for Monday night on USA Now on the John and Wai Take the Mic.
It is Rewind to Raw, moments after the historic 2023 WWE Draft is in the books.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, we were building up to this. It's finally happened. Almost. It's not completely done, John.
You're right. We have the supplemental draft, I guess, to look forward to on Tuesday. We have free agents.
Well, not Tuesday, right now.
That's right. They do the post show now. So maybe some people in the chat room can keep us abreast of the supplemental picks that are going down now. What's Raw Talk? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Raw Talk. So, I mean, hey, live coverage right here, live reaction, the biggest picks of all. Which show is Akira Tozawa going to go to?
Who has inked? Has anyone got Von Wagner, or is he just going to go show to show?
Hey, man. Only he knows.
Only he knows. I doubt he knows. He knows. You know, he was. You thought he was going to the next level at NXT, becoming a Beverly brother or a Beverly son, and now he's off to free agency territory. Well, we will get into the draft. We will. I've actually put together both sets of rosters so we can compare and contrast, see what the depth situation is like on both shows, and we do want to make mention that Wednesday. Get your exclamation points out because there is a major announcement coming from Post Wrestling and Poison Rana. Live.
Huge.
Right at the start of Rewind to Dynamite. The foundation is going to be altered. The circumference is going to be compromised. It is going to be known as before and after Wednesday, May 3rd, when this announcement is made.
Cores will be shook. Okay. With this announcement. Yes, very excited. We'll be joined by Braden and Davey on Wednesday. I'm really excited about what we're going to announce.
Yes, can't wait. They haven't even told me what the announcement is, so I'm tuning in just like all of you as a spectator. So I'm looking forward to this on Wednesday. Wai, my first question coming out of the weekend. You know, you have traveled the entire world as shooting some of the biggest combat sports events and getting right into the middle of things. How much would it take you to be shooting in the pit lane in Azerbaijan if you were sent out to right there onto the pit track as the race has not ended yet and a driver still has to pit before the end?
I don't think I would at all. I mean, depends. I don't think these guys were willing. Well, what John is talking about is just a unfortunate incident at the end of the Baku race at F1 last night, where just due to some miscommunication and I guess just a real lack of care, a bunch of journalists were put into harm's way. I mean, I think a lot of these were people that were working for the FIA themselves. So yeah, just a poor organization all around, I would say.
This actually could have been really, really bad. And what you had was one of the broadcasters is screaming at the top of his lungs. And I'm watching this thinking, like, what am I about to see here? Like, this guy's telegraphing, like, there could be people run over here. And then you have the other announcer saying, no, he's like questioning him. It's like, that can't be right. And this other guy's like, no, he has, Ocon here, he has to pit, or else there's a penalty. So then all of a sudden, all these people are out here and Ocon has to come in and swerve around these people who are running to get out of the way. And thankfully, no one was hurt here. But man, these announcers are like, if we could have seen this from this far away, how didn't they know? A total sham.
Shambles is the
shambles,
term, John. Yeah, it was certainly a shambles. Yeah. And I think certainly calls more into question. I feel like the FIA are often more in the news than the actual drivers.
Yeah, it's like the judges when they get a score wrong.
Well, this could have been a lot worse than that.
Well, today, a lot of times we start off the show and we go through a lot of unfortunate stories and like heavy stuff. I want to start off with some feel-good stories that we have today. We're gonna change things up. Today we got news of Corey Graves and Carmella announcing that they are expecting a child in November. I believe they announced this on Good Morning America, and this obviously explains why Carmella was abruptly off television before WrestleMania. She found out in March and wrestled mid-March at the Madison Square Garden house show. That was the last match she did. So obviously it was shortly after that that this realization was made. Of course, she had the miscarriage that she shared last year as well. So that's great news for the two of them. Richard Holiday showed up at the Beyond Wrestling show and announced that his cancer is in remission. And then we also had Gunther, who was off Raw tonight, getting married to Ginny. And Nikki Cross has handed in her dissertation for her master's in history, writing her dissertation on women's wrestling. 4 like wonderful stories, Way, to start off our week with. I would read this dissertation from Nikki Cross. Had I known this, this would have been my subject that I would have tackled in that interview when we spoke with her. I'd be fascinated to read this.
But maybe something you could have done yourself if you go back to school at some point.
Write my dissertation on women's wrestling?
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay, sure.
Sounds like something you'd be good at.
I doubt it, but were you a good essay writer in school?
No, I always handed in my essays like really late, and I'd come up with like terrible excuses every time about why. So I don't think I'd pass. So congratulations to all the people that you mentioned. Really great news all around.
It's nice to start off with some good news for once. So best wishes to everyone involved. On Tuesday, it's a very big week for AEW. Tuesday begins the pre-sale for the Wembley Stadium show with All In. So those that are previous customers of Shop AEW and AEW Plus subscribers, my understanding is you've received a unique code, and there's a 2-hour window on Tuesday to get tickets. And then the public on sale is later this week on the 5th. So my question to you, Wai, is now that we are inching closer, do you have any sort of a rough estimate of, not so much number-wise, but are you imagining this demand is going to be, listen, I don't think it's going to be poor. So we're looking at good, high, super high. Super high being that it's going to be an overwhelming number that we're talking about come this weekend or whenever, once the first 24 hours or so is in the book. What are you sensing for Wembley?
What's an overwhelming number?
Above overwhelming to me would be, let's say, over 60,000 tickets. That to me would be an overwhelming number if a week from now we're looking at like that kind of demand for this show.
Right. Okay. I'm guessing maybe a little under overwhelming, which is what, great in your scale. What did you say?
Say like 45 to 55 in that range. I would say if they're topping 40, this is a successful show. This is like a very successful number, I would say, to be aiming for. And I feel this one's going to top 40.
Yeah, I think so. It just maybe given what I know about some of these sort of pre-sale registrations and also just the general buzz, and maybe just hearing exactly how rabid some of the audience is over there, not just, of course, in the UK, but the rest of Europe, and really even, maybe some people here deciding to, choosing to travel all the way to Europe as an excuse to just, do some vacationing, but also to take in AEW's biggest show, one of the biggest wrestling shows of all time, potentially. So, well, I guess depends how many tickets they sell, right? But it's feeling like it's a really big event, and it sounds like it's going to be really hyped, and I'm sure it'll be quite successful at this point.
So that begins on Tuesday. We'll be very curious to hear from people, like what their experience is if they try to get tickets. I think it's going to be a huge demand for, and these are unique codes as well. So they have sent them out, and it looks like it's not codes that you can share with people. But nonetheless, if you get tickets, do let us know what the process is like. An interesting story today in Bloomberg. This is kind of stuff that we've been talking about, but this is as it relates to ESPN and the future of ESPN as a cable network and the migration over to ESPN Plus as it's, going direct to consumer. And this has been a major topic. And you have a lot of people watching ESPN given the amount of demand for ESPN and how many losses of subscribers does ESPN absorb before they make this full pivot to direct to consumer and essentially get out of the cable business. And this was a big discussion point we had with Pat Crakes last week, that here is this unbelievable industry that is cable for ESPN, because it is the transmission fees that they are receiving, that it's still a $28 billion a year business for ESPN to be in the cable business as it currently stands in 2023. But Jimmy Pitaro said to Bloomberg, "We're going to get to a point where we take our entire network, our flagship programming, and make it available direct to consumer. That's not a when, not an if, or sorry, that is a when, not an if. We're only going to do it when it makes sense for our business and for our bottom line." And Bob Iger, who had recently returned as the chairman of Disney, called the direct-to-consumer move inevitable, not providing a timeline. So, as I mentioned, it's still $28 billion a year that you're generating. But wait, if I was down to $28 billion a year, I'm starting to look at, you know what? How many more billions more could I be blowing by going elsewhere? So they have 74 million homes subscribing to ESPN. And remember, it's per home. They're getting a great amount per cable home for ESPN. But over the last 10 years, they have lost 25 million homes having cable. So that's what the erosion is that they've been facing. And it has been this downward slope. So they are looking at, as long as it makes enough revenue before we put all of our eggs into this streaming basket. The issue being that as these streamers have matured, you've seen that this is not going to be as lucrative of a business as cable is, at least not anytime soon. So this has not stopped ESPN Plus, though, that lost $400 million last year, which is pennies compared to Peacock, who are losing $705 million a quarter, as they reported last week. But they are talking about the idea of, when the NBA rights are up, of trying to renegotiate a deal so that they can get NBA games on ESPN Plus. So that's a big one for them. And they did credit a lot of the early success to ESPN Plus from the UFC, because when they put their first big UFC event on, this would have been the Henry Cejudo TJ Dillashaw fight in January of 2019, they picked up 568,000 subscribers for that. And that's before Conor McGregor first fought on the platform, and now has grown. They're at about 25 million subscribers. Peacock, conversely, reported last week they're at around 22. But interesting way is that 61% of the people that subscribe to ESPN Plus have it as part of the Disney bundle, where you can get Disney, Hulu, and ESPN Plus as a package deal, as opposed to 39% that just have ESPN Plus as a standalone. And as they have raised the price of ESPN Plus, they have not affected the price of the bundle. And it's been pretty much in pushing your subscribers to get this bundle so that it raises all three of their services, which it does make sense. But that's another big part of ESPN Plus's success, is being tied to Disney Plus.
Certainly, yeah. And I guess you can always play around with those sort of things when you're a part of a major corporation and you own all these things. Synergy, right? Whatever they want to call it. I look at it and I wonder what the rush is to leave. I guess traditional broadcasting, when you still have a lot of people that, I mean, it's not much different from people that order cable and just get an ESPN, might never really watch it, but they just happen to have it as part of their package. So what's the
people
rush?
You will lose forever once you make that direct to consumer move. Like 74
Why does
million...
it have to be one or the other? Why can't it be a slowly migrating hybrid model?
Well, I think that would be the hope, is that, like, I can, and I'm sure many people can speak anecdotally to, like, if your parents, like, can you imagine your parents if suddenly they're, my dad right now is following all of the NHL playoffs. There is no way my dad is getting onto a computer to watch hockey games. That will just not happen. And you'll just lose people automatically. When you're still at 74 million homes, I mean, it's shrinking, and you can't ignore this trend of where one's going and where the other is going. But the idea of just switching, one medium for the other, like, that is not going to happen. And this is still an extremely, like, I would not be wanting to look at cable as something that I'm, aggressively, but for years we had been seeing them almost like pushing people towards streaming. And I think now you're sort of seeing people kind of pump the brakes on that level of thinking, because people are realizing, okay, the grass is not going to be that much greener. Like an ESPN Plus, what is the ceiling? I don't know if in our lifetime we're going to see ESPN Plus hit like 74 million subscribers if you make the comparison to cable. Like, I don't know about 74 million people subscribing to ESPN Plus.
How does this affect maybe the prospect of content creators being able to increase their TV rights when TV is not as lucrative and streaming might not be as, as the paradise that it's been promised to be?
Well, that brings us to this other line in this Bloomberg story is, at the same time, ESPN is wrestling to control costs, a dynamic playing out across much of the media landscape. In late April, ESPN laid off dozens of employees, mostly those who work behind the scenes, and the network plans to make make cuts to its roster of on-air talent by the middle of the year. The layoffs are part of Iger's overall push to reduce spending at Disney by, get this, $5.5 billion. It's got to cut that off the bottom line. $5.5 billion of fat you got to find. ESPN also plans to be more selective about acquiring sports rights. So that's an interesting line as well when it comes to, what is going to be priority, that being the NBA, you would think, and what is not going to be priority. And everyone always talks about the sports rights of people getting squeezed out. ESPN is going through this transition, but it's typical that the cuts hit the talent and the behind the scenes people, and it doesn't always hit the sports rights. That NBA is going to get a massive increase. But for instance, like in ESPN, does that affect their renegotiations with the UFC, for instance, which is only a couple of years away as well? So that's an interesting one on top of it. But yeah, ESPN is going, Warner Brothers Discovery, ESPN, they're slashing a lot of costs, and it's, when you're not getting the returns on these big streaming initiatives, at some point, like, you do have shareholders to answer to, and then it's cutting costs elsewhere when you've sunk so much in and you're losing $400 million a year, this many years into an ESPN Plus, of the idea like this will be profitable, but it's not profitable yet.
Right. And ultimately, how does that affect the companies that we cover in a WWE and AEW? They are well-performing, items that are available on the market. But what's the budget that these companies have in order to get into a bidding war? And there are going to be some companies that are going to maybe pay top dollar for it. Will it ultimately limit their options, or what? I don't know.
Yeah, that's... Nick Khan's idea has always been that it's the people that are the top tier, and some would associate WWE as being in that upper tier. It's sort of like the NFL is in its own stratosphere, but then you have, your NBAs, which I would say is still a league above your WWEs and NHLs. But I think WWE, they very much want to be kind of in that sort of upper tier where it's not everyone's number one among sports, but it's, right underneath that level in terms of what it can bring. Now in AEW, I look at it in two ways: of this new economy for a lot of these television sports rights that might be looking for what are bargain spends for us that can bring great return for minimum cost. AEW qualifies for that. Like, if I was somebody that had a really tight budget and I cannot afford a SmackDown that wants a 2x increase on $205 million a year, but what's something that's not going to bring the same level numbers of SmackDown, but comparable for a fourth of the cost, that to me is where an AEW becomes attractive, if we're getting into a lot of cost cutting and where people still need to produce these numbers, but don't have the budget to bring in the A brand that a WWE would represent.
Yeah. Attracts a younger audience, or at least for a good time it did. And think of all the IP, John.
The IP is the understated value of all of this. So we will continue to follow the future of television. But in the present day of television, we have SmackDown numbers going back to Friday, and they had a great number for the draft, where they did 2,467,000 viewers and a 0.67 in the demo, up 14 and 24% respectively. And this was a night going against the second night of the NFL draft. They were also going against the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs on top of that. And this was their second largest audience of 2023. It was a 4-week high in the 18 to 49 number, also a 4-week high in the 18 to 34 audience. And if you compare to last year when they were up against the NFL draft. This exact same week last year, I mean, they dwarfed their number last year in the 18 to 49 demo. Like it was a taped episode last year on this week, and it was under a 0.4 that they did. This year was a 0.67. So it was very successful. In fact, year over year, April of last year versus this year, they're up 24% in 18 to 49. So that's shows you where the level of post WrestleMania interest is this year compared to last on the SmackDown end, but a very, very good number. Not so much in Canada because they got bumped to OLN. So they were low, 58,000 viewers in Canada, and then did 37,000 in a replay at midnight on Sportsnet 360. So people listened to Rewind to SmackDown, then they flipped on Sportsnet 360 for the replay. We were the leader for the replay.
Sure. You're welcome.
Rampage on Friday at the new time slot of 6:30 p.m. after they promoted 5:30 throughout the week. And then Thursday found out, nope, you're going to go on at 6:30. They were down to 298,000 viewers, a 0.09 in the demo. So compared to the week prior, which is not the cleanest comparison because we're talking about a Saturday night show that they aired in the week prior, but they were down 20% in viewers, down 25% in 18 to 49. And maybe this is why the firm deletion is just being thrown out next week, because they might not know when they're going to be back at their normal time. They will be on this Friday at 5:30. The next week, they're going to be on Saturday night at 10 p.m. So God knows when they're returning to Friday nights at 10. But the NHL playoffs are just throwing Rampage to every time slot but their normal one. And it's a chore just to keep up when this show is on. And it would seem that this had a much larger impact on male viewership than it did female viewership, because women either stayed steady from the Saturday show or were up, and men were down a big number in 18 to 49 and 12 to 34, like big drops from that Saturday show. But women found this show on Friday.
All right.
Looking out for Cash Wheeler and Jay Lethal and the Hart. Did you watch the setup for the firm deletion?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
That was quite the scene with Isaiah Cassidy. Awful. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Terry No territory.
They might have been banking on people not watching at 6:30 on a Friday. Despite that, though, I am looking forward to the firm deletion, especially learning that Giancarlo D'Atamo from GCW was the one that was filming it. That is almost as big of a draw to me as, having any of the wrestlers involved. Of course, like he's the guy who's been responsible for the GCW creative. I believe like the what's the Tom what's his name? The wrestler who versus Bret Hart, that tape.
Tom McGee?
Tom McGee, yeah, the Tom McGee documentary, among other things, on the WWE Network. So it's his version of the final deletion series. So I'm very much looking forward to it for that reason.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when we talked about it Friday, that I don't know how well this is going to do Friday at 5:30, but I think this will have a lot of life online after the fact. Like, I think everyone's going to seek this one out to see, like Giancarlo's like contributions and AEW doing one of these as well. This is more outside the usual AEW presentation as well that people are going to be interested in. So that's the latest there. Wednesday, New Japan has their Wrestling Dontaku card, and we have a new edition of Post Pro Res up on the site with myself and WH Park going through this card and many other stories that are happening. But the headliner is Sonata defending the IWGP Heavyweight Championship against Hiromu Takahashi. Is this among the better graphics of the year? This thing looks pristine.
It's very nice. I think New Japan always does great work.
This is very, very nice look here. I don't see Hiromu winning this, but as WH and I were discussing, I really like the idea of these two having an excellent match, which I think you would assume they have. And this is sort of the entryway to get Hiromu into the G1, competing here, taking the heavyweight champion to the limit before losing.
You really think this year they'll have Hiromu join the G1?
I'm going to say it, and then it won't happen, but I'm going to keep my options open that it could happen.
I mean, I just don't know. I think they have a lot of people that are probably going to be, wanting to be slotted into the G1, not just from New Japan, but also from other companies. And does that leave room for somebody who's already doing Best of the Super Juniors?
Well, we will see. He is headlining this show. It's a big spot for Sonata and Hiromu at Fukuoka International Center. Other matches include Tama Tonga and David Finlay for the never openweight title. That could definitely be a title change. Never openweight 6-man Minoru Suzuki, El Desperado, and Ren Narita against Okada, Tanahashi, and Tomohiro Ishii, which is quite the star-studded never openweight title match. Zack Sabre Jr. and Jeff Cobb for the television title. Strong openweight title match between Kenta and Hikuleo, and then a bunch of multi-man tags underneath that will make up the rest of this card. So that is early, Wednesday morning at 4:30 a.m., hours before the WWE investors call to reveal their Q1 earnings.
What a perfect combination.
Dude, I'm getting up at like 5:30 on Wednesday to start all this. It's going to be a very long day. So Karen Peterson and Bruce Lord will be doing a review of Wrestling Dontaku for Post Wrestling Cafe members later in the day on Wednesday. So you can check that out, postwrestlingcafe.com, with the tandem that is Karen and Bruce that have just been receiving rave reviews.
Great reviews for those two. Yeah. As well as, everybody contributing to the site. So WH and John did, of course, a preview of Dontaku tonight on the Post Pro Rest show. So yeah, go check all that out.
Yes. We also mentioned the fact that at Demand Lucha, the next Demand Lucha show, they have announced El Hijo del Vikingo versus Gringo Loco versus Speedball Mike Bailey versus Jack Cartwheel for that card.
That's a pretty crazy match. Wow.
Wai has said he will come to a Demand Lucha show sometime this year.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. It's hard to schedule these things, but
I understand.
Sure.
Last thing before we wrap up is the next two nights of television. NXT. This is going to be an interesting one. Elba Fire and Isla Dawn, or Isla, or Isla, however you want to pronounce her name, if you are on the WWE broadcast team. They are defending their women's tag titles against, now part of the Raw roster, Katana Chance and Caden Carter. Could you see another team inserted into this match, making it a three-way? Like, they've got to get the belts off of all of these teams.
I have no idea, like, why.
And do you think they knew Chance and Carter were being drafted when they made this match last week?
I mean, honestly, John, it's a great question. At this point, I don't think you should add anybody else. I think one of them should leave with the championship, and then you book your way out of it, because it just feels so just sloppy.
There's nothing to stop them from having the champions come back at Battleground to lose the belts, and they have a month where they're going back and forth.
Part of me almost wonders if would this be an opportunity to split the women's tag team championships, and Raw gets one and SmackDown gets one, but they don't have nearly enough tag teams to justify a Raw version and a SmackDown version of those tag team titles. So,
well, tonight you had Bailey stating we're going to be the next women's tag champions, except they're on SmackDown and the belts are on Raw. So you do have a problem now with like Damage Control. What are they fighting for on SmackDown?
Well, I guess they never really explain, like, are the champions able to go freely across?
They drafted the champions to Raw, so I'm assuming they can't go back.
Yeah, but they also drafted Owens and Zayn. They hold the SmackDown championships. And I mean,
they never said that they can go back and forth.
Well,
they said only one person can do what he wants, and that's Brock. Brock can go back and forth.
Right.
Brock is above everyone.
They should have probably been a bit more clear about that. But in the past, like, champions have been drafted that have been able to go, across brands. It just means once they lose the championships, they belong to that brand.
But that kind of defeats the purpose of Roman having his belt. Like, what? Roman can go back and forth?
Well, Roman now has a brand-specific brand, though. A belt, which is the Universal Undisputed.
No, he has two.
Heavyweight.
He has two.
Right. Both of those belts are now a part of SmackDown. Okay. It's very easy. Very simple.
Yeah, it makes total sense. The rest of NXT has Wes Lee against Drew Gulak for the North American title. Gigi Dolan against JC Jane, where Gigi's baby brother will be ringside.
Who's going to play the baby brother? And how much of a baby is this brother going to be?
She kept saying my baby brother, but this was years ago that she left the house.
It's got to be like a really big guy. Like, who's the biggest guy on like Davakato is her baby brother, maybe.
Okay, sure. Daba Dolan.
Yeah, sure. I'm excited. I mean, I guess neither of them are moving, so it can't be a blow off.
No. Dragon Lee and JD McDonough, though, could be, because JD McDonough is going to Raw. Mm-hmm. Axiom against Scripps. Joe Gacy against Joe Coffey. So if Gacy wins, the Dyad never get another tag title shot. until their contracts are up on October 14th. And if Joe Coffey wins, then the Dyad if Joe Coffey wins, then the Dyad do not get the title shot. Gacy wins, they do get the title shot.
Yes.
I'm trying to keep this straight. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
And Danny Palmer's in action way.
Ooh, great. Awesome. Hey, so this is actually a pretty big NXT. You know, a lot of people are going to be having their last NXT appearances. And that, of course, includes a lot of the other draft picks that were just announced, including Grayson Waller, including Indus Shear, including Odyssey Jones. So
I'm surprised that they would draft Grayson Waller on the post show.
Yeah, me too.
Where are all these people going?
So Grayson. So this is according to John Cena in the chat room. Grayson Waller to SmackDown, Jinder Mahal along with Indus Shear to Raw, Odyssey Jones to Raw,
and that's all of the other Odyssey Jones.
NXT.
Wow,
guys. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll look up. I mean, we'll go through the show and then maybe at the end we'll talk about all the supplemental drafts as well.
And then just quickly Dynamite, and then we'll get to Raw. MJF and Sammy Guevara against Jack Perry and Darby Allin. That should theoretically set up the Double or Nothing main event. The Tres de Mayo Trios Battle Royal. Saraya against Willow Nightingale. Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, Orange Cassidy, and Bandito against Daniel Garcia, Jake Hager, Menard, and Parker. Juice Robinson against Ricky Starks, and the Elite will appear on the show in Baltimore on Wednesday night. Okay. To get everyone caught up to speed on the supplemental draft over the weekend, SmackDown got Hit Row and Lacey Evans. Raw got the Viking Raiders and Valhalla, Dexter Loomis, Candice LeRae, Maximum Male Models, Natalia, Apollo Crews, Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, Zoe Stark, and JD McDonough. And our free agents are Omos, Mustafa Ali, Dolph Ziggler, and Von Wagner. I guess with Brock as well. So these are the most powerful people coming out of the draft here on the screen. And Scott Stanford's look says it all.
I didn't know free agency was an option. Now, was it an option or were they just simply not picked? How did?
Well, the story was that Brock and MVP negotiated the free agency for their sides. And conventional wisdom states the other three were forgotten about and undrafted.
I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because I don't know if there's reason for any of them to not have a side other than just they simply don't know what to do with any of them.
From a logic standpoint, Von Wagner makes no sense. Like he's been called up to not be drafted. It's like no one wants him, but he's been called up by who? Like, how is he a free agent as opposed to Wes Lee?
Right. Like, why couldn't anybody from NXT declare free agency?
Like they're all technically, I don't.
And I guess what's Ali and Ziggler's story? Like, hey, like you know, there's a huge bidding war over the both of them. They just can't choose. They don't like any of the offers. They're just testing the waters.
Did Johnny Gargano get drafted tonight?
Did he
He didn't get drafted during the show.
Let me just see. Did he get drafted during the supplemental draft? Let's see here. Oh man,
because his name never came up.
All right, so this comes to us from John Cena. Okay, John Cena, the man who seems to be ahead of everything. Johnny Gargano to Raw.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was that on the supplemental draft?
Supplemental draft. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So there you have it. So at least
they have their people that they want to feature on the show itself, and unfortunately, Gargano doesn't make the cut, and it kind of sucks for anybody in this supplemental draft. I look at an Apollo Crews, who, I mean, was really just supposed to go to NXT to refresh his character. Kind of ended up coming back like less of a bigger deal. He did.
It's okay though. He saw this coming. He had that vision.
I guess so. Sure.
They do have the All of the Way is now on Raw.
Yes, as I think we expected.
So tonight's edition kicked off with Paul Levesque coming out. This was a sold-out show at the Dickies Arena, 10,405, and it was a pretty hot crowd that all came to hate Dominic Mysterio. And Triple H mentions it's sold out, and he brings up Roman Reigns, who is soundly booed, and explains that because he got drafted to SmackDown, the World Heavyweight title is exclusive to Raw. And then explains that Brock Lesnar is not eligible to be drafted. He renegotiated his status as a free agent earlier today.
Right. Okay. Well, good for him.
Yes. And Paul Levesque was so caught off guard by this that he said the rosters go into effect Monday, March the 8th. So we have 10 months to let these draft picks simmer, and then they go into effect a month out from WrestleMania next year.
Right. I mean, they're booking ahead. That's nice.
So the first round, Rhea Ripley is the first draft. So the SmackDown Women's Champion is drafted to Raw. Did you notice Bianca Belair was back to being the Raw Women's Champion tonight after being named the SmackDown Women's Champion on Friday?
Well, I mean, she is the SmackDown Champion. I guess.
I'm saying Bianca though.
Right. Okay. Don't make me explain this, John. You know the reason.
Austin Theory drafted to SmackDown with the U.S. title. So you have Theory and Lashley on SmackDown and Bronson Reed on Raw going into Backlash. So that is that. Seth Rollins drafted to Raw and Charlotte Flair drafted to SmackDown.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there were any real surprises coming out of this first round. Brands getting the remaining championships and then the biggest stars. I think in kayfabe, I would say the ranking makes sense. You'd want all the championships on your show, except I suppose
draft. To me,
Seth Rollins and Charlotte Flair clearly take precedent over any of the tag team championships, and I think that's. Does
that make sense? You get two people if you and the tag titles like that. To me, would be the pick versus Charlotte, who's like on hiatus.
I really do feel like these tag titles, both of the sets of tag titles, are probably able to cross either brand for now, and for that reason, maybe not as much incentive.
Okay,
to draft them.
This is all speculation. They can change these rules whenever they want, and when they need them on a show, they will put them on the show. Heyman comes out and he states that the fate of the Usos will be determined tonight in the draft. They failed to win the titles on Friday, and they will be spoken about that privately later. And then he goes to mention that a week from Friday, Reigns will be back on SmackDown, and it looked like he just blanked on where the city was, but they will be in Knoxville, and asks if the new title would look relevant around Reigns' waist, and he can hold 3 titles. But he says Reigns cannot be on Raw, and that all the children in the locker room can celebrate that Reigns is not around. So Rollins comes out explaining that Roman doesn't have to run away from him anymore since they're on separate brands, and Heyman doesn't have to pull strings to prevent Rollins from getting another title shot. And he's going to win the title at Night of Champions, and asks Texas how fast he could stomp Heyman. And as he gets into his face, out comes Solo Sikoa, and a match is made for later tonight that Rollins agrees to.
Yeah. I found it very interesting, the tease of Roman possibly going for this 3rd championship as well, which I think would be hilarious. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to do some sort of like champion versus champion match, hopefully quite a while from now. I think that's sort of inevitable. Now, could Roman actually win all 3 championships?
Sure, why not? Why don't you create 6 titles?
They can create a 4th one. Yeah.
Why don't you make him like the Ultimo Dragon of this era? Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, it would be a funny visual, I suppose. And maybe it is, long-term build for Roman versus whoever the champion is. Maybe it'll be Cody on this end. But hey, probably happening eventually.
Cody arrived earlier in the day, and Adam Pearce asks him to not let this show devolve into chaos tonight. Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez against Bayley and Dakota Kai. This is a non-title match. So again, Damage Control have all been drafted to SmackDown. And at this point, Morgan and Rodriguez have not been drafted at this point in the show. So there's a hot tag to Raquel. She hits Kai with fallaway slams, the twisting elbow. And then Liv is on the shoulders of Raquel, but Bayley pulls Raquel from her leg. So Liv comes off the shoulders and lands on the knee of Kai. This looked very awkward. And then Kai hit the chiropractor to Liv. And Liv comes back, hits the Oblivion onto Kai, but Bayley is legal. Liv does not realize this and is left to take the sunset flip cover. Bayley pins Liv Morgan in 8 minutes and 5 seconds, setting up a title match where I guess if your theory is correct, Way, that these champions will magically go from show to show, then this makes sense to build to a match. But if not, then I don't know where this goes.
Again, like the women's tag team titles have always been the ones to go back and forth. So I wouldn't think any differently. It's and also because they just don't have enough tag teams really to fill this division if you're strictly sticking to one brand. I thought the match was fine, but it's really hard to get excited about just going back to Damage Control for another title shot. I understand this is a different Damage Control with Bailey and Kai this time around, but nonetheless, like the stories and the personalities attached to the scene feel very stale, and it just kind of feels like we're just waiting and just taking our time before going to Shayna and Ronda.
Yeah, and the story seems to be more of Io Sky breaking away from these two, that these are the two that are holding her back, and that's sort of your backdrop for Sunday or Saturday's title match. Lesnar arrived earlier in the day, and Pierce asks him to keep the peace tonight, and Lesnar just laughs him off. Here to make our next picks are Booker T and Sharmell, and they announced that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are going to Raw, the Usos to SmackDown, the Judgment Day, which is Finn Balor, Damian Priest, and Dominic, to Raw. So they are keeping all of them together with Rhea Ripley drafted earlier in the show. And then the L.W.O. This is 5 picks you get. Like, how many people, like if the NWO in WCW was in a draft, could you draft like 20 people if they were all aligned?
I mean, if they filled the proper paperwork to be drafted together, then
like this is your Moneyball pick. You get 5 people here with their merch numbers.
I don't know. I don't necessarily know though, because okay, in my head, if we're talking kayfabe here, I mean every single one of these people is a different salary amount. Okay, you're paying for these 5 members of the LWO. Do you want that bloat on your roster?
I don't know. Maybe they come as a package deal. Like, do you get all their merch money?
I mean, that would suck for this, Joaquin Wilde. How much of a cut do you think he's getting from this LWO? It's not going to be like, a fifth for every single one of them.
I'm sure the WWE has figured out.
You think you think Joaquin Wilde is making as much as Rey Mysterio?
Depends if he's, if he trademarked that original ROH logo and is getting paid in perpetuity for that logo.
He's probably not. No.
Okay. Braun Strowman and Ricochet against Chad Gable and Otis with Maxine in their corner. And dude, this was like an Attitude Era match where they had to just cram everything into 2.5 minutes. Gable and Ricochet have a strong start with a chaos theory by Gable. Strowman and Otis do their big man spots together, including Braun scoop slamming Otis, and then Ricochet comes off the shoulders with a swan dive, pinning Otis in 2:29. They raced through this thing.
They did the move that Raquel and Liv were trying to do.
That's right. You had the monsters and their human weapons, Ricochet and Liv Morgan.
Really big reaction for this Braun Otis showdown of the 2 big men here in Texas. And I don't know if this was meant to like build anything up or just to give Braun and Ricochet a win ahead of them being drafted, because they lost on Friday. So I don't know if they're necessarily building to anything.
They explained that this probably made a last minute impression on the War Room.
Right.
Got them drafted. We had they teed up the San Juan street fight between Damian Priest and Bad Bunny that Corey Graves said was the island made famous by the brutality by Carlos Colon and Abdullah the Butcher. Our next presenters are Shawn Michaels and Adam Pearce. And one thing was pretty clear, that when it came to these presenters, there were plenty of, hey, can you do Monday as well? Of just like an RVD to me is someone like, when you got to bring him back a second time, like are there that many few options that you have to just have some fresh people on both shows?
Listen, hey man, they just sold, or at least like they're in business with a bigger company. They're trying to cut their dollars, and these plane tickets are expensive.
Yeah, they were like, can you go co-terminus on SmackDown and Raw for us?
Sure, dude. Yeah, that's probably what he said.
So as Shawn and Adam Pearce are out, they are interrupted by Brock Lesnar, who comes out before they can make any picks, and Lesnar just walks past Pearce and ignores him and asks Fort Worth, how does it feel to look at the only real cowboy in this state? They were pissed at this guy. So Pearce sends down security explaining, not tonight. You cannot mess up the draft, this important draft. And so all this security comes out, and then Cody's music plays, but Cody jumps him from behind, coming out from the crowd, and security pulls Cody away, and Lesnar gets dinged here in the middle of this. There was like a trickle of blood on his nose. I actually thought this was like a pretty good segment to build this up and sets up the match on Saturday. That for the limited involvement that they've had, like this has been promoted very well, and I like this segment.
Yeah, I thought it was, pretty by the numbers. Just a big pull apart with Cody fighting off security guards. Maybe the best thing to come out of it was that little bit of blood that was probably unintentional, and Cody ended up using it in his promo later on.
Yeah, and the game is now for television appearances. How little does Brock need to do in these segments? He actually said words, and so that was something.
I mean, that's that tends to be. He's better when he's doing less. Is he not?
I think he has his work cut out for him though in this match. Like this is not going to be a 6-7 minute Brock Lesnar match. Like this has to be a real match on Saturday.
Right. Well, yeah, we'll see. I think a lot of it's up to Cody.
The third round, it's just Sean. Pierce is trying to get rid of Brock Lesnar. Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez are drafted to Raw with the tag titles. Asuka is drafted to SmackDown. Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods to Raw, and the Brawling Brutes to SmackDown.
So this means Drew and Sheamus are split up.
Correct.
Their deals are not coterminous.
No,
or maybe it is. I don't know what the term really
co-terminated.
Means. I really don't think any of these drafts mean a whole lot for the tag teams again, because I believe the belts are free to move back and forth. But I thought they should.
I mean, it would be wise for the shows to have that flexibility to.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately they do. They can put whoever they want on any show, but they should have that with the titles.
Curious what they do with Asuka, because I believe Isla Dawn does the Miss gimmick as well. So maybe there's potential with the both of them on SmackDown doing something with creating some other factions, perhaps, with some of the women now. No NXT call-ups as part of this round, which I thought they were going to do with Sean, but maybe he was on Raw Talk or something.
Riddle is hanging out with Owens and Zayn, stating that since they're drafted to Raw, we can hang out all the time. And Kevin Owens is overjoyed by this notion. Matt Riddle takes on Jimmy Uso, and Owens and Zayn are in the corner, as is Jay on the opposite side. And Owens fakes an attack where he goes down on the floor. Zayn hits the table with a chair, and the referee turns around, and Jay is holding the chair that Zayn is throwing to him. So Jay gets ejected. It was a pretty clever take on the usual Guerrero spot. Riddle gets.
I mean, is it though? Like, why would the ref care if the guy who was not in the match got attacked?
It's a pop. It's a pop. That's it.
All right, fine.
The ejection is like the easiest pop in wrestling. So Riddle gets shoved off the turnbuckle, and Jimmy super kicks Owens on the floor. Jimmy then takes the turnbuckle pad off, but Zayn distracts as Owens rams Jimmy into the exposed buckle and sets up the floating bro. So Riddle gets a rare victory in 7:42, beating Jimmy Uso.
Yeah, like it was a rare victory, but they really did everything here to justify Riddle pinning Jimmy Uso. Okay, like they're very protective of these Usos, and I mean, they had a 3-on-1 advantage here for the baby faces. They had Zayn essentially distract in order for Owens to slam Jimmy's head into the turnbuckle for Riddle to win. So
this is babyface psychology in 2023.
Here it worked fine. They had it was kind of justified with Jimmy instigating a lot of this cheating himself. Yeah, I mean,
but the story as well is that Jimmy Uso was left on his own here. He got no backup from, Jay was thrown out, and then it was the big mystery was why wasn't Solo out there with them, that they would address backstage as Heyman is telling Sikoa to take out Rollins tonight, and Jimmy enters asking why his brother wasn't there, and Heyman explains that it was per the orders of Roman Reigns because Sikoa is concentrated on his assignment tonight against Seth Rollins, and they left Jimmy on his own, and all of the bloodline, by the way, all on SmackDown. So continuing that story, which you kind of need to, as you're going to continue this tension with Roman, with the Usos, and Roman's return to television, next Friday, a week from Friday.
And again, if the tag team titles can travel, then it doesn't necessarily write Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens off from SmackDown either.
Then we had Eric Bischoff and Rob Van Dam. What a pairing this was. Pretty good reaction for Van Dam in Fort Worth.
Yeah, always.
So Trish Stratus is going to Raw, Karrion Kross to SmackDown, Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler to Raw, and LA Knight to SmackDown.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they gave LA Knight sort of like the profiled like final spot here. And you had Graves acknowledge on commentary that his popularity has been growing. So I think they might be, certainly catching on and maybe considering starting like sowing the seeds of like a babyface turn for LA Knight. But just the fact that he was even one of the featured drafted numbers here and not a part of the supplemental draft, I think tells you that they see a lot in him, and we're likely to get something a bit more. I mean, they're also seemingly like pretty high up on Karrion Kross as well, which kind of surprises me, but there you go. And then Ronda Rousey, of course, number 15 on a night 2. So
like a pretty throwaway, pairing that we're talking about, like a group of Karrion Kross and LA Knight mixed with Ronda Rousey. I mean, does that not tell you everything right there?
Yeah, about Ronda, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, totally. No, her stock has fallen considerably. Absolutely.
MizTV featuring Shinsuke Nakamura. Miz asks if Nakamura has a chance to win the title, and Nakamura is just sitting there and says, "Hi." And Miz just played it off pretty well, saying, "We've already done our introductions, and obviously you don't want to answer this question." And says how Triple H wanted a working horse champion. He was obviously talking about me because I do all the media, I do all the junkets. And Nakamura, you would be a great number 2 with me. We could help each other. We could have a merger. Miz K Nakamura. And then Nakamura says, Chisai Kintama. And he starts stating this over and over again. And Miz starts chanting it. But then when it's translated, it means the guy with tiny balls. And the crowd chants tiny balls. And Miz tries to attack him, but gets laid out with the Kinshasa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no one better at being the Miz than the Miz. I'm going to say that.
Yeah. No, hey man, this ball stuff is I guess effective for their audience. A lot of people seem to really like it. And yeah. Not for
Great
me.
start on Raw for Shinsuke Nakamura. Brand new coat of paint. Omos takes on Anthony Alanis, which allowed Corey Graves to make a bunch of Alanis Morissette jokes. And Omos killed this guy in 49 seconds with a tree slam. But the bigger news was this go home angle for Rollins and Omos was awesome, because I thought that the involvement of Rollins when he came out here and did this promo about how important this match is, what it means for his standing, that Omos is representative of how he has had this adversity staring over him like a 7-foot giant, and beating and chopping down Omos is like chopping down all the critics that have counted out Rollins. So this win is going to be one that represents my new life on Raw, with a championship to put my focuses behind now that there is no Roman Reigns to freeze me out of this championship. So Omos is my last obstacle, and you're going to fall just like everyone will at Night of Champions 1 month later. So it's great.
Did you get like an international special feed or something?
I dozed out during this part, and I imagined what a segment involving these two who are apparently having a match on Saturday, what it would encompass. Instead, we got no interaction between Omos and Rollins. What we had was last week of Rollins saying, "I'm going to get a good match out of you. Tune in on Saturday." I have no idea why these two are having a match. It's like this tourism board said, "Listen, make your match. We want Bad Bunny and stuff. We want Omos and Rollins on this card, just in any form or fashion. We just want them there. You don't even have to promote it. Just put them on the card."
I totally forgot that this was happening. Did they even mention it while Omos was there?
I don't even know if they mentioned it. Maybe in passing, they mentioned that they're facing off this Saturday, but it was as cold a go home. Like there was nothing to it. You can't even judge anything. There was no, you could have watched this and you would have no idea they're facing off on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's fine. Road Dogg and Molly Holly come out for the 5th round. So Braun Strowman and Ricochet go to Raw, Shotzi to SmackDown, Bronson Reed to Raw, and Pretty Deadly are alive, and they are going to SmackDown. And we get confirmation that they pulled themselves out of the river, and they were at the Performance Center reacting to their drafting. So that's good.
What the people that put them into the river? sitting next to them.
You know what? Let bygones be bygones. Okay. Haven't you ever drowned somebody?
Yeah. Anyway, happy for them. I think they're a very complete tag team for the moment they hit NXT, and I think they will actually be very popular here on the main roster in quick fashion. So, fashion, no pun intended, I guess. I kind of look at them as maybe like a counterpart to the Maximum Male Models. They'll be on SmackDown, so probably like their version of like the comedy tag team. But they're a team that I can actually see winning the championships.
From Owens and Zayn?
No.
Oh, okay.
Maybe not yet. Not in the immediate. No.
If they split the titles and these titles mean less, they'll be in the running.
Sure.
The Judgment Day come out and they put over Ripley being the first pick, and she's got the SmackDown Women's title, and they run Raw and they go over the matches that Priest and Rhea have at Backlash, and then Priest screams at Bad Bunny in Spanish, and he's going to receive his punishment at Backlash. Then Dominic gets the mic, and this crowd just obliterated him with boos. It was an awesome atmosphere for this whole promo, and Dominic was just working his way through it, but you could tell like milking it at the same time, and finally says how Priest and Rhea will dominate at Backlash, and they just want no part of this, and states with the L.W.O. drafted to SmackDown, tonight will be the last night he gets to embarrass his dad and his loser friends before they go run and hide on Friday nights. So Jefe comes out with Santos Escobar and Zelina Vega and says no one is running or hiding. We were selected to SmackDown, and Ray explains how the draft works, and then says if Dominic thought being whipped by his belt at WrestleMania was bad, next time you're going to feel La Chancla.
Mm-hmm.
The chanclas are going to be brought out.
I mean, L.W.O. chanclas, who wouldn't buy a pair of those? Come on.
I think that just anything that they can put the L.W.O. logo on now, they're going to be doing.
Ooh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, Brandon from New Jersey was pretty happy about this one.
I bet so. He was probably asleep, but I'm sure when he watches this, he'll get a chuckle. And Ray can't wait for Zelina Vega to leave Puerto Rico with the SmackDown Women's title and watch Bad Bunny. It's an interesting match, this Rhea Ripley and Zelina Vega one. Like, it's going to be like such an incredible atmosphere for Zelina Vega that, maybe that's the trade-off is Vega loses, but Bad Bunny wins.
Yeah, I don't think Zelina's winning, especially since
I know, but dude, it's going to be such a downer for that crowd, but we will see how they structure that match because it's going to be super heated.
Yeah, I could see Bad Bunny taking that one, but I mean, SmackDown will already have a champion, so what is she fighting for here? Taking the Raw belt over to SmackDown for 2 championships?
Well, it'll be the SmackDown belt that she's taking to SmackDown if she wins this one, right?
Then what does Bianca?
Oh, then what?
So Bianca has to lose.
Well, then we have 2 SmackDown Women's Champions, and then we can create another Women's Championship, and we have 3 women's titles.
Well, it's obvious, I guess, isn't it?
There's a video for Imperium. Weren't on the show, of course. Gunther off getting married. Rhea Ripley, Damian Priest, and Dominic took on Ray, Santos Escobar, and Zelina Vega. Kevin Patrick just casually mentioned that Damian Priest's aunt taught Bad Bunny in school, that their families know each other.
They're from apparently, like he said that they're from the same small town, and a lot of the family's members know each other. So that's a connection I didn't know before.
Yeah, this is pretty late in the game for us to be learning these facts about them.
Well, maybe he just did some extra research.
Maybe they got on
Ancestry.com.
That was probably it. Yeah,
could be.
Who does Ancestry cover your teachers?
Probably not. No, maybe that's the extra tier you got to pay for. Would you ever do one of those?
Yeah, I would try it. Sure. I don't know how much I would learn, but I'd be curious. Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd learn a whole lot.
They could also tell you anything, and you'd believe it, wouldn't you?
No, they usually have proof. I mean, you ever watch Finding Your Roots?
No, I've never watched it. I'm sure it's
a PBS
compelling.
show. It's great. It's fantastic.
Well, Ray is in with Dominic, and then Rhea stops a cover, lifting Ray above her, and then Vega hits her with a 619 into the midsection. Priest then is run into the corner. He's on the ropes and Ray goes for the 619, but is tripped by Dominic. So Santos hits Dominic with a dive, and then Rhea drop kicks Santos on the floor. We get a Meteora from Vega, and as Priest lifts up Ray for the Razor's Edge, he arm drags Damian into the ropes, goes for the 619, and Balor takes the bullet for Damian Priest, eats the 619, allowing Priest to recover and hit Ray with South of Heaven in 8 minutes and 51 seconds. And going into unless they do some last minute setup, perhaps the L.W.O involvement on Saturday. I mean, I thought for sure that they would have a match, and maybe they will. But nothing setting that up tonight, although they could easily just snap their fingers and make a tag for that show, but not something they were hinting at here.
Yeah, nothing for the pay-per-view. I would assume that Ray and the L.W.O and the rest of the Judgment Day get something on the SmackDown. Let's remember that's from Puerto Rico as well. So
they're gonna have 17,000 people there on SmackDown on Friday.
Right. And of course, like within the matches themselves, especially the Bad Bunny match, I think it'll heavily rely on the L.W.O. So, maybe not having a Rey Mysterio build match on the card is questionable. But
you're right. They could do something on SmackDown, and I'm sure you're going to see Ray on the show on Saturday. The street fight, I would think that there would be some involvement there.
Yeah. Even in Texas tonight, I thought the action was really good here, and there were really strong crowd reactions to a lot of the sort of pairings that you got to see in the six intergender man and woman match. I thought Rhea was used incredibly well. I think the match with her and Zelina will be really, really hot. Zelina, I think, still maybe show some, it's a little awkward maybe seeing maybe the height difference too. It could be a little bit difficult, but like the Ranas look great, and I think the reaction for the match itself from that audience will be tremendous. Same with Bad Bunny versus Priest.
Do you see this as a pause on this program with the Judgment Day and the L.W.O? Like, these are separate shows, and it would seem as though this is sort of what we're going to go our separate ways at this point.
It looks like it, right? I mean, predominantly we're talking about Ray and Dominic, probably putting that on hold. I mean, that's a years-long feud you could build to, right? So keep them on separate brands, maybe a good thing. You allow Dominic to continue to, flourish without constantly being attached to Ray. Maybe come WrestleMania season, you get the two of them paired together again. When those borders,
Father's Day in June, house call.
There you go. Like, I only want these two to see each other on holidays.
Kathy Kelly interviews Cody Rhodes and is asked if Brock is in his head. He says he's been in my head since the night after WrestleMania. And what Brock wants, he usually gets, but not at Backlash. Unlike Lesnar, I have to win. Lesnar doesn't need to win on Saturday, but if I lose, then finishing the story ceases to exist, and it moves me to the back of the line. I don't know. This guy should look at some of these numbers that they're doing. I don't think Cody's going to the back of any line, and he refuses to go to the back of the line.
Yeah, what would the back of the line mean? He'd have to be on main event. Come on.
Go back to developmental Stardust.
I like the fact that he, mentioned the Brock being human because he saw blood, tonight. I thought that was a good way to incorporate that. The finishing the story thing, what exactly is the story at this point? Is winning any championship the way that he finishes the story, or is he still after Roman's championship? He has not mentioned that, not talked about that at all.
This is instead of finishing the story, he's starting the spinoff.
Before the season finale? Before the series finale, I should say.
Yeah. This is he's aiming for Frazier. That's the hope.
So it doesn't get renewed for the final season, and none of the cast know, but somebody gets a spinoff deal.
Possible, yeah. See, at first I thought this Cody Brock feud would be a 2-show deal where they come back at Saudi Arabia, but you would think that I guess they could do that. Because Cody should not be. I guess it depends on what this tournament format's going to be. Are we just getting the finals of this tournament in Saudi Arabia? Are they going to do a one-night tournament deal?
A champion will be crowned in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, we just don't know how.
Well, maybe Brock will enter it.
Brock should be in it. Logically, to get this over, you should have both, and these guys could take each other out of the tournament, and they come back. And if it is a 2-match program, then Brock should win this first one, and maybe does win it in like one-sided fashion?
I think Cody has to win this one. I think this match is like a really glorified version of like a rehab match for Cody Rhodes. After like how shocking for so many people and how disappointing the loss was at Mania. Like I would have Cody. Well, yeah, I guess maybe.
I think he needs to win the last one. If it's a 2-match one, he can afford the loss if you're doing a rematch. But we'll see. I have high hopes for this one. They're also doing a Backlash press conference Friday at noon with Bad Bunny, Lesnar, Cody, tons of people that are announced for this. That will be streaming at noon. Byron Saxton interviews now again the Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair, who is asked about being drafted to SmackDown, and man, really gets over the intensity of this feud. It doesn't matter what brand I'm on. I have nothing but love for Raw. So come Survivor Series, this promo will be referenced, I'm sure. Damage Control come in and call themselves the future women's champions. And Belair says, I've always been impressed by Io Sky. I was excited when she came at SummerSlam, but I've seen her attach herself to you two that have done nothing but hold her back. And finally, she has a chance to step out and shine at Backlash. Sky responds in Japanese, and Belair says she doesn't need it to be translated. I don't think Kathy Kelly was about to translate this. That would be my guess.
No, I think Dakota was going to.
Oh, okay.
Dakota was about to speak. Yeah.
Well, she says, no need because we understand each other.
Well, Duolingo, Google Translate. It's very easy these days. Hey, I thought this was a good segment, especially of the two Japanese speaking segments we had tonight. I definitely felt this was a better one. I feel like we finally got to see a bit of that strong competitive personality from Bianca Belair here, and I feel like we haven't had that in quite a while, especially in a lot of these other feuds that she's been going through with people who aren't necessarily great promos. But tonight I thought she herself cut a really good promo, and I wonder if it's any coincidence that her segment seemed to have a bit more effort put into it this particular week.
Possible. Teddy Long and JBL are out for the final picks. They're back. Otis and Gable are going to Raw. The Meat Mountain, Rick Boogs, is going to SmackDown. You can tell that this was not the outtake photo.
Away from Nakamura.
And Elias didn't get drafted either. So
Elias was on the supplemental.
Is he on
draft.
The supplemental? Where's he going?
No, from the first supplemental draft. So,
and what show's he on?
Oh man, dude, there are like 50
okay,
people on this roster.
Don't
Here, let me just see this. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I
Cino, let us know. Why even ask me?
Katana Chance and Caden Carter get drafted to Raw, and then Cameron Grimes, who's been ready forever, gets drafted to SmackDown. He's been off NXT for months at this point, so he gets drafted. And then, as Wai mentioned, we got more NXT picks after Raw.
Yeah, really great to see the call-ups here in Chance and Carter and Cameron Grimes. Of course, we had talked about what this means for the NXT Tag Team Championships. Did they know that Chance and Carter were also going to be picked when they made that match? Find out, I guess. But Cameron Grimes, why wouldn't they have had JBL make that announcement? Come on.
Yeah, I guess you could have done that for Graves did point out the similarities between JBL and Grimes' character as well.
So Elias is a free agent.
Oh man, the bidding can begin now.
Yeah, as of
for
tonight.
Elias.
So there you go.
I don't know. Would you be worried if you were a free agent?
I don't know. Like, again, in the kayfabe world, what does free agency mean? It means you can. Are you going on like a per date appearance? Do you have like just sort of a termed contract where Raw gets you for like 2 months and then you got to look for your second contract after that? I would be a little concerned.
Well, Xavier Woods cut a promo about being drafted to Raw. Cool. And then Seth Rollins took on Solo Sikoa in the main event. There was a Samoan drop to Rollins for a 2 count. He hit the spinning solo for a 2 count. This was after Rollins hit 3 consecutive suicide dives. And then Rollins gives him a big slap and asks if Solo is just Roman's little bitch. So he hits him with another spinning solo. He's ground and pounding him. And the referee starts to warn Solo. And Rollins then shoves Sikoa into the post, hits a super kick, rolling elbow, and with that, the Usos run in for the DQ at 10 minutes and 43 seconds, followed by Owens, Zayn, and Riddle, who had about 13 seconds before the show was going to be off the air. So the second they hit the ring, they were fading to black to end the show. They ran right up against the clock.
Yeah, something felt like it went really, really long. And I mean, this is a pretty dense show with a lot packed into it. The match itself, great chemistry between these two. You know, I think Rollins, of course, is fantastic, but Solo seems to pair really well with, you know, anybody who's like a bit of a high flyer. Really, he pairs well with everybody. So unfortunate about the ending, but this was just not the point of the match. The point of the match is just to build towards Backlash. Before we maybe get into the supplemental draft, what did you think of the addition of Raw as well as the final build here on Raw for Backlash?
I think that I don't think it was this incredible go-home show, but I'm really looking forward to Backlash. I think it's a very good card. The crowd's going to be amazing, and I like the Cody Lesnar segment that they did. The Bad Bunny stuff was more so done last week with Priest, and they've got him on SmackDown Friday, so that will be the big push. And I think having that crowd in Puerto Rico on Friday is going to be a bit of a taste of what you're going to get on Saturday. So overall, like, my interest is pretty high for this Backlash card. I think it's a good card from the 6-man that they've got with Owen, Zayn, and Riddle against the Usos and Sikoa. Io Sky and Bianca Belair, that's a big match for both of them. I think they've been able to make this Rhea Ripley-Zelina Vega match more intriguing. The location helps a lot, but if you were to have told people 4 weeks out that this is the follow-up to WrestleMania, it sounds very flat, but they've managed to tell a story. And, you know, I don't think it's going to be the match of the night, but I think it's going to be one of the more heated matches.
I think so, absolutely. I think they've done a great job with the L.W.O. period, you know, just obviously beyond the merchandise. I think it's elevated Santos to an extent. It's given Ray something maybe a bit more substantial to do with the Judgment Day. So I agree that I think my interest is pretty good for this edition of Backlash, and that's not because of this edition of Raw. I don't think they had much focus, or at least like much to substance, I should say, you know, for the Backlash builds. A lot of that already took place a week ago. This really was just to remind you about the card that was to happen, or in the case of Rollins versus Omos, not reminding you and having you just kind of figure it out on Saturday. And then of course the draft itself. So let's get into some of these supplemental draft picks here. This one comes to us, of course, from Raw Talk, and also from @CnoEvil, the man who always has his finger on the pulse here. Final draft picks. Raw gets Dana Brooke, Johnny Gargano.
How does one brand get so many in this? Like, how does the supplemental draft work?
It's because Raw has so many people, and
I understand. I'm trying to like keep it logical with what we've just seen. Okay.
So last year they did the what is it, 3-2, right, ratio for Raw picks, and I think that was always a bit awkward on TV.
They just even the numbers on the supplemental.
They're hiding it basically off
from from like an actual standpoint. This is a lot better. I'm just stating from the but let's pull up the list again. So
Dana Brooke, Johnny Gargano, part of the supplemental draft. Nikki Cross finished her dissertation, got supplemental drafted to Raw. Los Lotharios, if you remember, they're still around, and are they not from Puerto Rico? Oh wait, no, they're not. They're not. Okay, well. So anyway, no involvement from them as far as we know. Akira Tozawa, Piper Niven, Xia Li, Tegan Knox, Emma, Riddick Moss, her boyfriend, Odyssey Jones, Indus Sher, and Jinder Mahal, all to Raw. SmackDown gets Tamina and Grayson Waller. So 2 for
I hope they give Grayson Waller several weeks of like vignettes and promos. Like that guy is going to do really well if he's given a fair shot, which if they're drafting him, I think they would. That's that's a big gap that they lose in NXT. Has lost. Braun Breaker was not drafted, so I guess that was the interesting one, and maybe they want him to play this heel role for an extended period. But that's a significant loss, losing Grayson Waller at the NXT level. Like there are people very high on him,
but he's ready, you know. And what's the point of NXT but to get a guy ready? And he clearly is ready. I think interesting that he was part of the supplemental draft and not made a bigger deal out of, you know, on the show itself. But it's never really an indicator of, I think, somebody's success. Like if I recall, wasn't Alexa Bliss, you know, ranked very high in her draft, and look at what she ended up becoming, right? So
who are the free agents that were listed there?
All right, so the big ones here. The free agents: Baron Corbin, Shelton Benjamin, Cedric Alexander, Elias, and Zion Quinn.
Dude, Zion Quinn. It would be very frustrating for an NXT performer when, like, no offense to some of these guys, but when you have Zion Quinn, Von Wagner, and Odyssey Jones that are getting the call up over so many others.
But again, it doesn't necessarily mean much. Again, like you mentioned with the Braun Breaker, it means that they probably need Braun first of all, and they want to see him develop. Maybe they have higher expectations for a lot of these guys. Whereas Zion Quinn, maybe they feel like, hey, we're not necessarily, like, a year here is not necessarily going to make them any more ready.
Well, it makes a difference for some of these performers when you're on
the
an
money.
NXT
The money
contract
matters
versus
for sure.
a main roster
Yeah.
contract. I don't think
True.
they care about the reasoning behind it. Yeah, I don't know if you were a free agent, like I don't know. We haven't there's just some people here that just they're going nowhere, and that's sort of where you see things.
Like a Shelton and Cedric, at this point, I don't really know. Like, same with Mustafa Ali and Dolph Ziggler. Are they just looking to have like jobbers that you can put on either show? You know, whenever you need somebody to get an impressive win over somebody else. I'm not really sure about this whole free agency thing. Corbin, I suppose maybe you can use it as part of a story of him trying to get a job, like the Heath Slater thing.
Done the stories with him at this point. Just some observations here. Looking on the Raw side, they are very babyface heavy. So listen to this. This is your babyface roster. You have Cody Rhodes, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, Matt Riddle, Shinsuke Nakamura. I would say of those, you would have to be looking at least one person turning. I would say Drew McIntyre would be a candidate for a turn because on the heel side, you've got Gunther, the Judgment Day, and Bronson Reed as your top heels, which is fine. And you also have Brock kind of floating in and out when you're doing like a big pay-per-view or program. But I could certainly see like that's a very heavy end for the baby faces, but this is sort of your division for creating this new championship.
Yeah. I think we can look forward to some heel turns here. I mean, I think that it's great news for JD McDonough, who, you know, it's like a wide open lane there if they want to be serious with him to, you know, push him as like a serious heel potentially.
I would say Gunther is poised to, like, they need, like, he is by default, you could argue, the throwing out Brock because he's not a regular every week. Gunther is your top heel on this show at the moment.
Totally, yeah. And I'm sure like you'll see maybe some sort of free agency type of thing with a Brock Lesnar around from time to time, maybe even an Omos sticking around from time to time as well. So, but I think for Drew, it's time to we see a different version of him.
Yeah, for the women on Raw, like obviously Becky Lynch is your top babyface, and then you do have Raquel and Liv Morgan. Those are like your top end ones. On the heel side, there's a lot to work with here. Rhea Ripley has the title. Trish Stratus, who will continue the feud with Becky, Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler once Ronda's healthy. And then you have like Zoe Stark coming up. You have Katana Chance and Kaden Carter coming up. You have Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, like a ton of heel women on that side of things. And Becky can only work with one person at a time. So I would hopefully that they're going to develop some other baby faces, which that could mean that Raquel and Liv being on this show, like they have more than enough teams to be programmed with. If it's with Ronda and Baszler, if it's a short thing with Katana Chance and Kaden Carter, there's quite a bit there on the women's side.
Yeah.
And Indy Hartwell is also on this show as well. So maybe her and Candice are going to be paired together.
I'm not as optimistic about maybe the treatment of the women, just because I haven't been given that much reason to be optimistic. I mean, typically, if you're not involved in a feud with Becky, if you're not involved in a feud with Bianca, there's really not a whole lot for you, and that includes the tag team champion. So until they can maybe prove, otherwise, I'm just not going to get that excited.
And just a quick look at SmackDown. So on the babyface side, we have Bobby Lashley, Rey Mysterio, Edge, AJ Styles, Santos Escobar as your top end baby faces. On the heel side, you have the Bloodline, Austin Theory, Karrion Kross, Grayson Waller, LA Knight, Sheamus. So, a decent mix here. How would you state the babyface side looks as it pertains to opponents for Roman Reigns with
I think
Lashley, Ray, Edge, AJ as your top ones.
I actually feel like they found a way to like find some pretty fresh opponents here. Like I'd be most excited about an AJ Styles Roman Reigns match. I think Edge at this point like can feel fresh, especially if you're doing like an Edge like sort of like last chance at the championship type of story. Bobby Lashley too. You know, of course they have unfinished business that they'll probably get back to at this point. And then beyond that, who do we have? Austin Theory. Maybe a bit slim pickings after that. But then, of course, we also have the Usos who are currently involved in the story, and maybe a Jey Uso Roman Reigns matches in the future this year as well.
In a weird way, I do sort of see Austin Theory and Grayson Waller competing for the same spot. And
Totally.
I think that Grayson Waller can come in here and it'll be interesting to see who he is booked with first. If he's given someone big like a Ray or like where he has to start, because he could very quickly ascend. Of course, there is kind of a limit on the heel side when you're on the Bloodline brand.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see how he is in 6 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
And then just quickly on the women's side, so the SmackDown has Bianca Belair, Asuka, Zelina Vega, and Michin. The heels, Charlotte Flair, who's out, Damage Control, Elba Fire, and Isla Dawn, who, I mean, they could be coming in as heels or baby faces, depending on where they go with Shotzi and Lacey Evans. So not the most depth on the heel end with Charlotte gone. And I would say even with Charlotte in there, it's sort of, her and Belair is obviously a big match to do down the road.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these matches we've kind of seen, right? Asuka, Charlotte. I don't know. Depending on if Zelina really looks great this Saturday, maybe that's a match you can go to. But I think Alba Fire and Isla Dawn are like, if they again, the lane's wide open for them to really kind of like, get people's attention and to do something with it. Tamina being a part of this draft as well, maybe it means that she'll have something. She's on the same roster as the Bloodline. Mm-hmm. Maybe that would be a way of boosting her with that sort of attachment. So, yeah.
Can you see them trying again with Shotzi and or Lacey Evans, like giving them the latest?
Sure. Yeah. Why not? Like look at what Bianca Belair has like gone through, at least on TV, right? So yeah, I think fresh people for her to beat is always going to be a thing.
All right. That was the 2023 draft. This will be a fun list to look back at 6 months from now and see what is your expectation level on how disciplined they are going to be this time around on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being we're going to see no cross-pollination till WrestleMania next year. That's the big interpromotional match of next WrestleMania.
I think that'll be really difficult. Like, so maybe a good question would be, okay, how long do we're going to see people jump shows. Okay. We're going to see trades. How long until they don't even mention the concept of trading or this sort of like wild card day or whatever. And they just have people like swap back and forth freely. I'm going to say they're going to give it like a good 6 month try. Okay. I mean, that already sounds incredibly optimistic, but what does that take us to? Survivor Series, maybe.
Yeah, go less than that. I think as soon as it's football season, September. Okay. As soon as Monday Night Football is coming back, I think that's when they're going to feel the need to jumpstart things. I really don't care. I think this is still a much stronger company when you don't have this brand split. So I'm not one that's championing like distinct rosters.
I would like to see like, maybe they formally announce that, okay, after the Rumble, the borders are open. Anybody can cross, and that also like in a way creates a bit of a playoff season for WWE, where like, like in Major League Baseball, you get the National League teams mixing with, I haven't watched baseball in years. So like, do the teams mix? No, I guess they don't mix until afterwards. But anyway, it would create maybe some specialness attached to some of these shows where you get to see people jump back and forth. But can they be disciplined enough to get all the way to January where that would actually feel special? So yeah, no, you're right to be cynical.
Yeah, there were also several notable names that were not drafted. Of course, Bray Wyatt, Randy Orton, but people that are unavailable or injured, not part of this at all, which I guess doesn't come as too much of a surprise when they they weren't listed to begin with.
Yeah, also on the list, John Cena, thank you again. Tommaso Ciampa, Alexa Bliss, Aaliyah, Carmella, of course, Gable Steveson, Logan Paul, R-Truth, Robert Roode, and Shanky.
Yeah,
So,
well, the majority of those are injured. Or in the case of Gable Steveson, I mean, he got drafted to win the U.S. Open over the weekend. So, I mean, he's trying to maybe draft himself back for another Olympic bid.
Hey, we have some super chats here from these guys, from all of you listening at youtube.com/postwrestling. Let's go first to Rob McDonald, who says the Wednesday news will be Wai has been drafted to Poison Rana. Davey has been drafted to Post. Uh-oh. Who told him?
We'll have our guest presenters come and announce.
It's quite the prediction. All right. Rob also says Leafs are in second round. Panthers versus Leafs Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah, we're aware. Thank you.
Well aware. Yeah, I heard it from my house. Okay, like people were shooting fireworks here, and I don't think that was even legal today.
Yeah, but their first playoff win in 19 years.
Yeah, something like that.
So how will the second round go?
As well as this draft sticking until January, I think. But we'll see. We'll see. Let's go to LCT, who sends $5 to ask predictions on the Universal and tag titles. Will the Universal be retired after Roman hits 1,000? How will the tag team titles be split?
Will the Universal title be retired after Roman hits 1,000 days? You could.
Yeah, I have no idea how they want to present it. Maybe it makes no sense now to call this thing an undisputed championship now that there's an extra championship around. So do they want 3 belts like hovering, in existence? This whole thing is a shambles, to quote the commentator from F1. Whatever. Like what looks better? Okay, that's the better question. Do they want Roman to have 2 championship belts, or do they just want 1 championship belt on Roman? They can do anything. I'm sure it's up to the marketing department. How will the tag titles be split? I don't know if they'll be split. I mean, I guess you have more incentive to like split the men's tag team championships because there's more depth on either roster of the tag divisions.
It's smart to keep the certain titles that are floating belts that allow you then the out to get people onto other shows when you need them and have a storyline reason to do so, which I'll take over we don't even need a storyline reason to do so. You at least have that as your key to get to the other show. And right. Owens and Zayn being available on both shows makes a lot of sense to do.
Let's go to Matt Hahn, who sends $5 to say all that teasing with them splitting up tag teams and no one got split up. Also, when could you see them doing a Rollins versus Roman match? Yeah, so on that first point, I think this was a clear sign of, miscommunication or just lack of foresight with getting the commentators all week to announce who's going to be split up, what tag teams will be split up, and then just telling us that, oh, by the way, they're all going to be drafted together. I feel like that was like some clear miscommunication where maybe one side didn't know what they were going to do the next week. It's better this way. Like I don't like teams being split up for no reason. What do you
when they split up the New Day? That was a great idea. Remember when they put Big E on? They split him.
Well, I mean that paved the way for him to win the championship.
And then they put them all back together.
I think they were probably wanting to create like a big reunion, and yeah, maybe.
Do you remember the reunion?
No, not at all. No. Could you see them doing a Rollins versus Roman match?
At some point, sure. I don't see them doing it imminently.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I just don't see Roman.
In the immediate, you need a Saudi Arabia opponent or a program for Roman.
Sure, right.
And I think you need to do a singles match with Roman in Saudi Arabia.
Any guesses? Any picks? Who would you say?
It could be AJ. It could be. I mean, you can look at the list like a Lashley and AJ. Like those are some of your options.
Omos.
Is Omos on SmackDown?
He's a
free agent. So yeah, he could Omos and Roman. Sure.
So that means Omos would have to kill
beat Rollins.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, for a Saudi Arabia show, I don't know. I think anything goes, right? Like
they did Logan Paul. They could do Bad Bunny.
They had The Undertaker, or they had Goldberg, concussed. They had it's like I wouldn't be that surprised, like if they went that
Shane
route.
McMahon had been healthy, maybe he could have done it.
Maybe that's what the build was going to be. Snoop Dogg. versus Roman Reigns.
All possible.
One more here. Jake from the Windy City says, I see the brand feud back for Survivor Series. Okay. I don't know. I just that doesn't seem like a Paul Levesque like thing, right? Like especially
Might
if
not
like
be a
War
Paul
Games.
Levesque thing.
But that's a very good point too. But does War Games return?
Again, I don't think you have the idea that this is all just strictly Paul Levesque at this point. So I would say, yeah, it worked last year. You would think that you would lean into things that worked. War Games certainly worked in Boston last year. But I mean, for years, that was there was one person that did not want War Games, and you got the brand versus brand every year at the Survivor Series. So that's one. Yeah, that's a possibility. It certainly could be coming back. Let's go. We have a Mogan here who says the few things I liked about this year's draft are as followed: Pretty Deadly, Chance and Carter, Grimes, Indy, Elba, and Isla Dawn, all making the jump to the main roster, and they all deserve to get a bigger spotlight. However, if Rhea and Bianca trade titles, it'll tell me that nobody's learned a thing from that fiasco. Other than that, it was a solid go home. I'm getting a little sick of the Uso X Machina. Machina.
Yeah, I guess just like them coming in and causing the DQ. I think they're going to just do the title trade, and I know a lot of people.
They don't have to do some elaborate swap. They could just have Bianca show up with the SmackDown Women's title, and Rhea suddenly has no one. Everyone will say, "Hey, what happened to her title?" for 10 minutes on Twitter, and then it'll be just accepted. Like these are the new champions. You don't have to call any attention to it.
I think everybody sours on the idea because of just the fiasco that was the Becky and Charlotte one. For other reasons, the idea of a belt exchange itself, yes, it's kind of maybe insulting to like the people who keep up with title histories and record days and whatnot, but ultimately, what are we talking about? Switching the color and name of a championship, and I don't think it should be that. We should be that concerned.
Yeah, it's just Bianca can call herself the SmackDown Women's Champion on Friday, and she's the Raw Women's Champion on Monday. You just alternate which show you're on.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight for the coverage of the draft. Let's go over this week on the site, because on Tuesday, Braden and Davey will be live at 10:15 Eastern. It should be a noteworthy edition of NXT with a significant portion of their roster that is getting the call up, and that's going to probably make NXT interesting for the next couple of weeks. They also have that Battleground show to build up for, which is only a couple of weeks away at the end of May, that insane weekend.
Those two will be pouring a lot out for all the people that are about to be leaving NXT. So, yeah, let's see how they handle it on the show tomorrow, and let's see how many people in Toronto will not be watching the Leafs game and will instead be watching NXT.
A great question. Wednesday night, we will be live at 10 Eastern, kicking things off with a big historic announcement on Rewinded Dynamite. And the same day, PostWrestlingCafe.com will have a review of Wrestling Dontaku with Karen Peterson and Bruce Lord. Thursday, Brandon Thurston and I are going to do a analysis show on the WWE Q1 earnings. So the earnings call will take place on Wednesday. We will be live Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern to go through the previous day's call and Q1 report. And then we've got Rewind Away dropping on Thursday for all patrons, with Bruce Lord joining us live in studio as we go back to the Cruiserweight Classic Final from September of 2016 as the Final Four meet to determine the WWE Cruiserweight Champion.
And we might be pouring a few out ourselves with Bruce.
You might be tuning in for a review of the CWC and end with a taste testing live on the air. This is maybe, a video one, if there ever was one. So video.postwrestling.com. This might be the week you want to get the video version for Rewind Away. That is our tease for this week. But lots of big stuff coming up this week. Rewind to SmackDown. Wai and I will be live Saturday night after Backlash. And Phil and Eric are going to have a UFC 288 post show. I think they're going live at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. So maybe that is one that you're going to catch the podcast of later in the day, unless you're an early bird on Sunday. So they will have UFC 288 covered. Wai is counting down the minutes till Henry Cejudo comes out of retirement to challenge Aljamain Sterling for the bantamweight title. Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad going 5 rounds, all happening in Newark, New Jersey, this coming Saturday night. So the whole schedule up at postwrestling.com. And anything else, Way? Final words, final tips, final advice for the listener.
Final advice. Hey, rest in peace, Jerry Springer. Take care of yourselves and each other.